World of Warcraft hit store shelves in 2004, it quickly became a cultural phenomenon, transcending its status as a mere video game to become a global entertainment franchise and redefining an entire genre in the process. As computers had started to become more and more common in households, so too did PC gaming, and during the time, it would be rare to interact with anyone who hadn't at least heard of the game. It was the cultural phenomenon of the mid-2000s. Even those who had never even played a video game before had picked it up, and as players immersed themselves in the world of Azeroth and shared their experiences with friends and online communities, interest in the game would only grow and grow. But the question is, why? How and why did Blizzard's 2004 hit gain such widespread popularity? Today, we're not only going to answer that question, but we're also going to rank the top 10 reasons why World of Warcraft became one of the most popular video games of all time.
This particular online game actually has almost 8 million people playing it right now.
8 million people?
When it comes out, man, I'm just gonna non-stop.
Easy there, big guy.
I'm sorry for my girlfriend, because, I'm just gonna keep playing.
Coming in at number 10, we have Reputation. WoW was first unveiled to the public in 2001 via a trailer at the European Computer Trade Show, and at this point, primarily through their Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft series, Blizzard had already accumulated one of the biggest fan bases in gaming, and rightfully so. Quality took second place to nothing, and games released only when they felt that they were refined and polished, and consequently, the games that actually did release were consistently great, and titles that fell short were cancelled altogether, never seeing the light of day. When World of Warcraft was announced to be an MMO, the initial reaction was skepticism. Between Warcraft and StarCraft, they had firmly dominated the RTS genre at this point, and many thought to themselves, why fix something that isn't broken? Why move away from what's been proven to work and take a risk into this unknown territory? At this point in time, MMOs could only be considered as niche. Today, when new titles release, they're met with hundreds of thousands or even millions of players, but mainly due to technical and financial hurdles. The largest launch for the Western MMO would be claimed by EverQuest, which amounted to a mere 10,000 players. It was a risky play, to say the least, but even so, Blizzard's near-perfect track record gave players that initial push to take the plunge and step foot into the world of Warcraft. But, as they soon realized, while it may be easy to enter, leaving is another story. Coming in at number 9, we have Addiction.
Teenager hooked on violent computer games. He's playing them an incredible 16 hours a day. His mother says his personality has changed and that he's become moody and violent, and his addiction is tearing the family apart.
Flash, fantasy, and fixation are the features that contribute to the addiction that millions cannot shake for an online game called World of Warcraft.
It's very addicting. There's so many things you can do.
RPG games, by their nature, can be a pretty addicting genre. The thought of slowly but surely progressing a character day by day is enough to keep most people hooked. But introduce a competitive multiplayer aspect to it, with challenging group-based content to clear, as well as friends to meet and spend time with. MMOs today are known for their addictive nature, and along with games such as Ultima Online, EverQuest, RuneScape, and more, World of Warcraft was at the forefront of discussion of video game addiction. It was this online, virtual, persistent world with its own community, and some would even spend more time in it than their own actual mundane lives. It's unique in the sense that it just never ends. In a typical RPG, no matter how addictive they may be, players are eventually met with an ending credits and a thanks for playing in an amount of time that's equal to how hooked that they got. There's this safety mechanism in the sense that the more time they invest, the more quickly it's over. But in MMOs, there is no technical finish line. The experience is really what you make of it, and with content being consistently added through patches or expansions, the safety mechanism is removed as there's now always something to do. Questing, dungeons, raiding, PvP, gold farming, ERP, And if you felt like you've done it all, you do it again on another character. It's a veritable online theme park that only grows, which leads us to number 8. To say that MMOs are unique is a pretty big understatement because they are so large and there is so much to do. One can differ from another in many different ways, one of the largest being Sandbox versus theme park. The easiest way to describe these two subgenres is that the Sandbox focuses more on player-made content, whereas the theme park relies on developer-made content. It's open-endedness versus linearity. An example of player-made content would be a player-hosted dueling tournament. Members of a community get together, they eliminate each other one by one in a tournament-style setting, and the winners are given a prize that is funded by the hosts of the tournament. There's no built-in interface nor system to accommodate any of this. The scheduling, judging, management, participation, everything is run by the community. On the other hand, for developer-made content, to enter a PvP tournament, maybe you can enter a queue system and then you're matched against other players via an algorithm, and you're also given access to a special vendor to acquire gear upon winning. In essence, the players are accommodated by developer-made content. In the early years of the MMO, the industry was largely dominated by the sandbox style. The genre, again, was very niche. There was no one game that had become successful enough to establish a proven formula that led to success. So, because of this, experimentation thrived in search of this formula, and consequently, direction was lacking. Because the genre wasn't as profitable, publishers weren't willing to fund it as much, so player-made content was often the only choice. And while this itself didn't lead to mainstream success within the industry, it would lay the groundwork for it. And so, today, the genre is largely dominated by theme park, specially crafted dungeons, raids, PvP battlegrounds, scheduled, handmade, developer-made content. And that's the case because in 2004, an MMO was so popular that it had found the formula that would shape the entire genre for decades to come. Where other games had little to no direction in their questing campaigns, World of Warcraft offered a full linear guided campaign from level 1 to level 60. Dozens of custom-made dungeons were designed to be conquered in parties of 5, where PvP in other games was often a side activity and often lacked structure. World of Warcraft offered a system that both tracked progress and offered rewards, along with specialized objective-based battlegrounds to queue into at any time. Selling items no longer required haggling with the introduction of the auction house. Nearly every aspect was curated by developers, and it offered direction during a time where there was little. And perhaps most important of all of these features, coming in at number 7, we have the rating.
Who the fuck was that? Whelps, left side, even side, many whelps. Now handle it!
World of Warcraft, along with EverQuest, would help modernize and standardize many features that today are considered staples of MMOs, one of which being the rating. Since the dawn of RPGs, you've had cannon fodder and bosses, some big bad that's in charge of the operation who provides a more formidable challenge, and of course, greater rewards. The same was true in MMOs prior to World of Warcraft, of course, but they were often out in the open world, having lengthier respawn timers, so for guilds to kill these bosses and to collect their loot, they would have to race against other competing guilds for kill credit. Because of this, endgame activity as a whole was extremely exclusive and competitive, and it often required scouts to camp spawns for hours on end and alert their guild whenever something spawned so they could all make a mad dash and be the first to form. Now, World of Warcraft wasn't the first to implement instanced raiding. As far as I know, that title belongs to EverQuest with their Plains raids, but due to its overwhelming popularity that it would soon gain, they would standardize it. These raids had a unique ID for each guild and were completely private, resetting on a few day or weekly basis, which allowed people to schedule accordingly and clear it on their own time. On its release, this was the quality of life feature of all quality of life features, and it opened up the entire end game to a much more casual audience. And not only that, but the bosses themselves were much improved. Today, these early raids are often seen as archaic and outdated compared to modernized raiding, which is true, but at the time, in a genre where raid bosses often amounted to a unique model, higher health, and more damage, they were a cut above the rest. Even having one or two mechanics was considered advanced at the time, and this combined with instance raiding would quickly become one of the game's biggest draws. As players cleared these raids, word of their conquest would spread across social media, providing an intriguing look into what was then the bustling MMO genre, which leads us to number 6, and that's the fact that World of Warcraft was one of the first widely used forms of social media. Today, interacting with strangers across the country or even the globe isn't really that big of a deal. In all places where technology has been integrated into society, it is now considered standard, but back then, logging into Xbox Live to tell somebody that you fucked their mother was a much newer and mind-blowing thing. Welcome to the rise of social media. As personal computers and the internet had started to become more common in households, the world would be connected in ways that they never were before. Instead of remembering the Dewey Decimal System and going to the library, any question could be answered with a simple Google search. Learning how to change your oil, how to repair a certain toaster model, the internet has been as revolutionary and as life-changing as peanut butter. Out of the millions of web pages worldwide, a certain number of them were dedicated to what we now know as social media. MySpace would be one of the earliest widely used of these websites, followed by Facebook, and surprisingly enough, World of Warcraft. MMOs are social media, where the social are your fellow players, and the media is, of course, the game that you're playing. Multiplayer games as a whole would thrive during this time, but much of the spectacle surrounding World of Warcraft spawned from its ability to foster the creation of online communities where players from all over the world come together to interact, collaborate, and form friendships even. Through features like guilds, chat channels, player-created events, World of Warcraft provided a platform for players to connect and socialize in ways similar to other social media platforms. Players in major cities would share epic stories of a raid run, talk PvP strategy, or help somebody find Mancrick's wife, whether it was joining a guild, participating in a raiding team, PvPing with a group, posting on the Realm forums, or shitposting in trade chat. Much like social media, World of Warcraft provided opportunities for players to come together, build communities, and spout politically driven vomit for the world to ingest. And at the time, believe it or not, many people hadn't seen anything like it. It was a living, breathing, online, persistent, virtual world, which brings us to number 5, why World of Warcraft became so popular, and that's the world of Azeroth. Second, perhaps only to the actual gameplay, is the environment in which players explore. But a massive world was something that World of Warcraft didn't invent. The MMORPG genre at this point was largely defined by their immersive and expansive worlds, in fact. These other realms that existed persistently, where even after you logged off, there's something happening in every corner. This alone would do much to immerse players into these virtual lives, if you will. What changed since I last logged in? I wonder what level my friend is. Did they run that dungeon yet? Is there anything new on the auction house? Is that new raid open? It was unique and fascinating at the time, and the World of Warcraft didn't invent it. They certainly improved upon it. With over 40 zones, dungeons, several major cities on its release, the sheer enormity of the world was as intimidating as it was varied, featuring lush forests, towering mountains, barren deserts, and mysterious dungeons. Each zone was meticulously designed with unique aesthetics and themes, offering players this great sense of exploration and discovery. And perhaps most innovative of all, most of these areas were fully explorable without the need of loading screens. Something that you don't really think of today, but back then, while other MMOs had these large worlds, due to technical limitations, they would all be held within their own instance, and requiring a loading screen when traversing from one to another. And consequently, what would suffer, perhaps one of the most important elements of MMOs, was immersion. It's so important for the genre. You want the player to feel like they're part of this world and community, and nothing breaks that more than this loading screen every time they traverse between zones. So while World of Warcraft would have these between the two continents, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and also through dungeons and raids, every area was accessible without the use of a loading screen, which was extremely innovative, and it allowed players to travel between these extremely varied environments seamlessly. You could go from the snow-capped peaks of Dunmorrow to the forested Loch Modan, just like that, and it really made for an immersive and unique experience, and it was something that was only made possible by the next item on our list, which is its graphical style. As shown by the recent re-release's popularity, its graphical style has aged very well, often described as stylized or even cartoonish. It was a deliberate choice, and one that's paid dividends over the years. Unlike realistic graphics that can quickly become outdated as technology advances, World of Warcraft's graphics remain to be charming and visually appealing even to this day. During the time, many of the other MMOs would attempt to emulate this more realistic graphical style, and while they would impress upon their release, realistic by early 2000 standards is, well, let's just say that the technology has improved. But even putting aesthetics aside, where the style really shined was accessibility. One of the reasons why players would be able to traverse between the zones, as mentioned earlier, without loading screens, was due to this less intensive graphic style. In addition, computers were incredibly expensive during their adoption into the mainstream, with many matching or even surpassing even the highest end gaming rigs of today. And that's even with inflation and Big Mac meals costing over $17 fucking dollars. But I digress. But combining this with the unorthodox monthly subscription that the genre commanded, there are many barriers keeping the MMO genre from breaking into mainstream popularity. So by going for this more relaxed graphical style, they would minimize one of these barriers standing in between the players and the game. Coming in at number 3, we have the community. Owing to number 6 on the list, World of Warcraft on its release was a very social game. To hook players, you have to immerse them, and one of the most effective ways of doing so was to give them the feeling that they were living in this online society. This virtual ecosystem of recognizable names, guilds, cliques, groups, and to encourage interaction in many different levels. Whether it be mob tags only sharing in groups, group quests, dungeons, raids, crafting reagents made by other professions, making the most efficient way to farm honor to be through group play. To do much of the content within the game, it would require the aid of other players, and this would serve as a push for people to make friends that last even to this day, nearly 20 years later. And on this front, for many, it would become more than a game. It would become the nerd equivalent to meeting up at a bar on the weekends to stay in touch with friends. The only difference being, instead of slaying Poon, you were slaying dragons. And even as the game ebbed and flowed over the years in its quality and popularity, what would keep many around was the simple fact that it was a convenient way to spend time with friends. One of the most effective ways of retaining a player in these MMOs is to make it such that if they're thinking of quitting, they're not just walking away from a video game, they're walking away from weekends with the boys. There are many people playing right now where if all of their friends in guild were to quit the next day, that would be it for them. And that's why the community comes in at number 3 on our list of what made World of Warcraft become so popular. For number 2, we go back to the basics. The gameplay. Addiction, theme park, raiding, community, graphics, social media, whatever. It means nothing if the gameplay sucks, and this is where World of Warcraft would truly dominate the genre. It just felt good to play, to pop recklessness and then just brutally butt blast horde vermin, then send them back to Durotar. It appealed to everyone. Casual, hardcore, and everyone in between by offering this blend of accessibility, depth, and engagement, and it would keep them hooked for years. It was designed to be easy to pick up and play, even for newcomers to the genre. The basic mechanics such as targeting enemies, using abilities, or managing resources like health and mana were straightforward and intuitive, and it allowed players to jump right into the action without feeling overwhelmed by the complex and confusing systems that dominated the genre at the time, and while at the same time offering a surprising amount of depth and strategy. Each class had a unique set of abilities and playstyles, which allowed them to experiment with different approaches to combat, whether it be tanking, healing, or damage dealing, with some classes being able to switch between all three with variable success, while a basic understanding would get them along simple things such as questing and leveling. For those ready to take the next step, such as with the aforementioned, at the time, complex high-end raiding or competitive ranked PvP, it would require this push into depth and mastery for the more hardcore. But gameplay doesn't just mean combat, it's everything, such as progression. World of Warcraft on its release was extremely effective at giving players the feeling of progression mentioned in the addiction segment. With each level past 10 came a talent point. Every 2 levels came with new or upgraded abilities. Level 40 came with a mount, and each level also opened up these new and exciting zones and dungeons, or higher level gear to equip, whatever. No matter how fast or slow a player was, they logged off feeling like they had accomplished something. And it's something that you only really truly appreciate once you don't have it, and many would realize just how good the gameplay felt when they dabbled into one of the many WoW killers that would challenge its reign, such as Warhammer Online, Age of Conan, Star Wars The Old Republic. Games that released years and years, or a decade after, just couldn't seem to hold a candle to World of Warcraft's finely tuned gameplay, which comes in at number 2, and is trumped by only one other. Ultima Online, Asheron's Call, Star Wars Galaxies, EverQuest, RuneScape. These titles would all be crucial in helping form what the MMORPG genre is today, but one thing they all seem to lack that World of Warcraft had was accessibility. Where other games had you invest stat points of unknown function or usefulness right at character creation, World of Warcraft gave you 10 levels to get a handle on the game before giving you your first investable talent point, which could later be refunded. where other games had harsh penalties to dying, such as XP loss or permanent character death, World of Warcraft simply required a corpse run and a repair bell. Where other MMOs required boss camping and racing other guilds in order to participate in the endgame, World of Warcraft again offered private instanced raids to be cleared at the guild's convenience, where other games offered these very convoluted and intricate ways of character progression. World of Warcraft offered a very simple and straightforward system that felt intuitive and less intimidating, and it goes on, and all of it was capped off with this fully curated, guided linear campaign of quests that took players all the way from level 1 to level 60 in a sea of extremely harsh penalties for dying, unintuitive systems, lack of direction, high-end graphics requiring expensive computers to run them. World of Warcraft offered the opposite. Its ease of access has played a very crucial role in its popularity by making the game much more approachable and appealing to a broader audience, while at the same time providing a fascinating online community where players can come together to explore, socialize, and embark on epic adventures in the world of Warcraft. Thanks for watching my video. Let me know what you think, if I missed anything, or maybe you would order these differently. Obviously, it's a very subjective thing, but I think I covered the highlights here. Aside from that, I didn't announce this yet, but memberships are now active on my channel, which give you a few different perks such as early access to these videos and some emotes and badges and whatnot. So check that out if you want some extras, or if you would just like to support me and my endeavors on here. And just expect a lot of videos in general. I've been really motivated video-wise lately, so 2024 is going to be the year of the Mad season, so yeah, look forward to that. Regardless, like the video if you liked it, because I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.